I'm Bouris and this is Straight Talk.
I was a few years deep in a relationship with someone that I found out was a really bad person, did some really bad things that I won't ever talk about, for legal reasons.
They forged an unlikely friendship after looking for love on a reality dating show.
Bachelor's a bit of an unusual show for me.
What sort of idiot falls in love on a TV show?
Laura, I love you.
I was so ready for you to break my heart.
I worked COVID in emergency. I have a degree in medical radiation science, so I worked in hospitals all over the world, worked the whole of COVID because we were short. The hospital staff needed people.
Now, Life Uncut boasts more than 30 million downloads.
So I remember we released the first episode, forgot about it. The next day I got a message saying, congrats on #1. And I was like, #1 what? They're like, you're #1 in the country. And we were like, what?
You run a successful jewelry business called Tony Mate. You've got kids, you've got to manage relationships, and then you're doing the podcast and the radio. I mean, how do you do all this stuff?
Yeah, I know. Well, that's a really unrealistic expectation for mums. Matt does 80% of the parenting and I'm doing 20%.
I wasn't just ready to love. I think I was ready to be loved.
What do you mean by love? What's that mean?
You're really going to get something deep out of me here, I think.
Britt Hockley and Laura Byrne, welcome to Straight Talk.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for having us.
I'm so excited to be here, actually. Do you want to know why? Multiple reasons. But first off the bat, not many people actually ever want to talk to us, do they?
Serious?
I mean, it's usually because we're the ones doing all the talking on our own platforms. People we've heard enough from them.
Yeah. So it's nice to have someone new to be on the other side.
Yeah, well, I'm really interested to talk to you guys. I want to go back and just understand, what were you doing before you went on the TV show and why did you go on the TV show? And I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Brittany.
What was I doing before? I was I have a degree in medical radiation science. So I worked in hospitals all over the world in emergency departments and operating theatres.
What does that mean? You're the person who does the ultrasound or something like that?
Ultrasound, MRI, CT scans, a lot of the operations. A lot of operations people don't know, but they can't be done without being guided by people like me.
Yeah. So you're the person when I walk in there and down to St. Vincent's down the road and they say, just leave your underwear on and put that gown tight, put the opening in the back. And can you just, when I come in there, just say, can you lay it on? Are you warm enough? And you pull the sheet up, and then you put a pair of headphones on me, and you lock my head in the thing so I can't move a fucking
You're talking about an MRI.
Yeah. Because I've had plenty on my brain, and then you send me in this machine. I feel like I've been buried alive. Is that you?
That's me.
And you go into the machine and you say, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Are you all right in there, Mark?
Are you having a panic attack?
Yeah.
No,
Give me a Valium.
That's me to an extent, but I mainly did emergency work. I like the trauma hospitals and the trauma work. I want to be the one resuscitating someone. I want to be the one that, it sounds bad, but the more gruesome for me, the more interested I was, because your brain works so fast and you don't get time to think about something when someone's bleeding out in front of you, because quite often people don't realize that we're almost the first port of call when you come into a hospital. If you come in, you've been in a car crash or you're unwell or you got a brain bleed, people don't know what's wrong with you yet. So we're the first port of call. So I really loved that. I loved that lifestyle and I did that for about 12 years. But then I had this really creative side too. So in my 20s, I went to acting school and I did years of acting. And I did that all over the world too, over in Scotland, the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. I just had this a real battle for wanting to do good for the world, wanting to help and use my brain, and then also wanting to use this passion I had for the arts and entertainment. I've always wanted to entertain. And then I went on this round the world 3-year trip. So I quit one day because I'd had a really bad day in emergency. And
like a gap year, but for 3 years.
Well, I just didn't come back. Yeah, I was 27. So this is what brings me to the Bachelor. So at 27, I left and I did about 60 countries over 3 years with my sister, who was also a radiographer. We worked together. We're best friends. So we traveled, nonstop for 3 years. And then when I came back, I was 30. And I'd always said, if I came back from this trip and if I've dated in 60 countries, I have dated in every country, every color, race, religion, occupation, height, you name it, I've dated it. I tried.
A little bit later, I need to know what you learned from that, but go on.
Yeah, so I really put my feelers out there to find my penguin, and I just said if I come back from 3 years of travel and I'm 30 and I'm single, I will apply for the Bachelor. And never did I think that would happen, and it did. And I came back from that trip and I was so bored. I was like, this can't be my life now. Like once you've had this taste of adventure in the world and then you come back and you're doing a 9 to 5, I couldn't go back to a normal life. I was like, I need something else to propel me forward still. And so that's how I ended up on The Bachelor.
Well, and I find it quite intriguing because a radiographer is like science-based job. Everything is convergent thinking style, and that 1 + 1 = 2. You get all various parameters, and that leads you to a decision that you then hand on to the doctor, or whatever. That's a convergent way of thinking. Then you're also telling me though you enjoyed the divergent style of thinking that is more creative. Most people are strong on one or the other and have a preference for one or the other. It's interesting that you seem to want to flip between the two.
Yeah, I did because I got different things from both of them. They were both. I was filling my cup with both. The creativity side, I always wanted to be an actor or a presenter or in TV and entertainment. But I was very much encouraged by my family, by my dad to, I could do whatever I wanted in life. Possum, you can do whatever you want. You can be whoever you want. But I'd prefer you to put yourself in a position where you don't need a man, you're independent, you look after yourself, and then go chase your dreams if that's what you still feel after that time. So I was very much encouraged to get a degree and put myself in a position. Dad's number one rule for life was make sure you look after yourself and you don't ever have to rely on anyone else. So that's sort of why I went down that medical route first, and then I came back to the creativity after.
And Laura?
I was like, where do I start? Oof. Okay, so I had a very traditional sort of like route through university, raised by my mum, single mum, 3 kids. And my mum was really creative, like incredibly creative. She would make leotards and stained glass and jewelry, and she was a jeweler by trade, but she became a school teacher. And I had always, since I was about 15 years old, been obsessed with jewelry making, and I would have little stores at the front of the house, and I would go to the markets and I would sell things that I'd made from the time I was about 7 with my mum, who would sell her works on the weekend. But she was also a school teacher because she had to put food on the table. So I guess I grew up thinking I needed a very traditional job as well, and I went into graphic design and marketing, and that was my stability. And then I was still doing jewelry on the side, and I was selling it to my friends and selling it at Bondi markets. And I had quite a big thing go wrong at work this one day, which forced me to quit. I'd sent an ad campaign to print. It was a Australia-wide second, third page of every newspaper across Australia, a huge ad campaign that cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I put the wrong phone number.
Oh my God.
It was like, call now, book now, completely wrong phone number. And it was kind of the real kick up the arse that I needed that made me realize how much I wasn't taking my job seriously. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try this jewelry thing that I've got going on. And if it all goes terribly, then I'll just go back and get a job that I hate. That can be my life. So I quit my job and I started doing jewelry full time. And then that led to me opening a shop in Westfields. I had a retail store there. And I was also trying to juggle this building of my business and trying to create a lifestyle of, I was working every day in the shop and also going home at nighttime and making jewelry. And I just had a mess of relationships at that time as well. So I was in my 20s and everything was just a chaos. And the way that I ended up getting on The Bachelor was I'd just come off the back of another monumentally failed relationship where my housemates were like, just, you know what, you just need to have some fun. And so they were the ones who actually signed me up for the show. And it was all this big joke at the start. So I did it thinking this would be a great way to get back at my ex-boyfriend. Did not.
For him to see me smoking hot on TV.
I was like,
making out
how can I really make him hurt? I'm going to sign up for a reality TV show. Never thought I'd get in. But then the process happened. And I got down to the final. I'd gotten selected to go on the show. And I thought, you know what, I'll just put everything on hold for a little while. And I had a lot of back and forth. I actually said no to doing the show. This is going to sound so woo-woo, but it was the night before we were supposed to go in. I'd already missed my call time. So I was supposed to go and meet sorry, this probably sounds confusing, but I'll set this up a bit better. We were supposed to go and meet and had a secret pickup location. A bus was coming to collect all the girls at 3 p.m. in Alexandria, and I totally missed it. And I called production. I said, I don't want to do the show anymore. And they tried to talk me out of it. And I was like, look, I'm really sad. I don't have any interest in doing the show. And also the risk of I felt like there was a big risk about being portrayed badly on the show that might then impact my business, because my identity was really tied to my jewelry business that I'd started to create and build. So I had a bit of a last minute freak out. Anyway, I went to bed that night, and all the girls were already in the experiment in the show, and I had a dream that I had to do it.
Serious?
Had a dream.
You had a dream?
Had a dream, 3 a.m. in the morning.
Like a vision?
Yep. I just had a dream that I really regretted not doing it. I don't know what it was, but I had this dream. I woke up at 3 a.m. and I called my sister and I was like, come over, help me pack my bags. I have to be at this hotel. So I rocked up at the hotel and I was like, will you still have me? Anyway.
Like when you rock up to all your ex-boyfriends' houses.
Totally. Very long story short, I met my husband on that show. We now have 2 children together and my life has changed forever. So I do not believe in that stuff. It's not like I had this massive turning point in my life where I was like, oh, I'm so spiritual now. But there was something about that moment where I felt like it was going to be a really huge and missed opportunity. So, yeah, and I probably did also make my ex-boyfriend jealous. So I think I really won that one.
Tick, tick, tick.
Well, you married someone too, which is pretty good.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, because I've had some experience in the reality sort of shows in terms of, being a host, but never on the other side of it. And one of the things I know is that the casting agents who cast the people like yourself, so they start broad, like might have 3,000 or 4,000 people could apply, which is what you guys did. Then they just keep whittling down. But what they got in their mind is they're looking for a certain type of person, or persons or group, and within the group they want heroes and they want bad guys or bad girls, and you've got to always be careful you could get cast as the wrong person. Did you ever know that, or did you just something you discovered during the process when you actually were on the show?
Well, I think The Bachelor is also a little bit different in that they cast. So they cast the people who are going to be the heroes, but they cast villains. And they also cast people who they know are compatible with whoever is the Bachelor. So there's 3 types of people. There's people who are lovely that the Australian public are going to love.
Yeah, we want her to win.
Get behind, but that they know aren't necessarily compatible with him, but that Australia will adore them. And then they cast people who, from all the psychological testing, they think that is genuinely a fantastic romantic match. And then they cast crazies. And that's the 3. And you don't know where you sit on that.
But did you know that before you put your hand up to go on the show?
No, I kind of figured it out after. I figured it out halfway through the actual filming process. But I think at the time, I personally, once I actually got into the show and realized this kind of demographic that they were casting in there, I was like, either he really likes me and this is going well, or I have terrible self-awareness and I'm the crazy, because the stories I was telling in my casting, the hot mess of like my backstory of my relationships, I think that would have come across as like, I don't know whether this girl's particularly dateable or not. So I wasn't sure where I sat, and I had a lot of apprehension throughout the whole of our experience on The Bachelor.
And what about you, Brittany?
I had no
She's
idea.
less crazy than me.
I had to buy a TV to watch myself on the show. So like I still to this day don't really watch reality TV.
But you hadn't watched The Bachelor before that? I
had watched it. Yeah, my friends and I think I got accepted on the 2nd season of The Bachelor ever, because my similarly to Laura, my friends put me in the mix.
So that's what happens if friends put you up.
Yeah, and I didn't want to do
absolutely.
it. This was before I went overseas for this 3 years. And I went, they drove me to the audition. I didn't want to do it. And I ended up pulling out at the last minute saying, I just want to go travel. Like, this isn't my life. And I don't know if that's really made aware. I don't know a lot of people know that I didn't want to do it at that time. And that was part of the reason that I promised them if I came back 3 years later, I'll apply. So I didn't know a lot about reality TV at all, but I figured it out pretty quickly. I'd like to think I'm a smart enough cookie, and I'm very, I'm pretty self-aware, I like to think. And at this point, I'd had a lot of life experience. I was one of the oldest people. I was only 30 when I went on, but I was one of the oldest people on the show. And I think probably I had the most life experience, and I could just see things going on and I could tell that no one else knew what was. And I was like, how do you guys not know what they're setting you up for right now?
Totally.
For me, and they hated that because I was too normal and I was too boring. But I feel like I was cast for 2 reasons. I think I was one of the 3 people they always say, the producers said, we usually cast 3 people we think you're actually going to match and have the successful love story. I think I was one of those people. I was on the Honey Badger season, and we just had far too much in common for me to have not been cast in that sense. We were born in the same hospital 3 days apart. We grew up in the same town. Our favorite countries that we traveled to were the same. Our favorite experiences, we wanted the same things. And they know that. When they're doing the interviews to cast you, they know that. So I think pretty much straight away I knew that I was supposed to be a contender. Whether he felt that was a different question, but I knew why I was there.
And what did you? I mean, like, what do you learn? You said you're self-aware, but what do you reckon you learned about yourself as a result of doing the show? Like, what do you have any sort of self-realizations in that show?
I think I realized that I wanted to be in a relationship again, which seems crazy, but I'd been single for the best part of 10 years. I almost married someone with a double life. He was a sociopath he was marrying someone else at the same time. He was buying the same houses at the same time. He set up these two lives identically with me and another woman. It was crazy. And off the back of that, I just said I'm never dating again. And I didn't have a lot of confidence at all. And just going on that show, it gives you a thick skin, that's for sure. I realized that I can actually deal with a lot of things, but I also realized that I was ready. It makes me feel vomitous to say it, but I felt like I was like, oh, cool, I actually do want to love someone again, because it had been so long. It'd been like a decade. And I started to think I was a sociopath. I had no feelings. Didn't feel anything. Didn't cry. Wasn't happy. I was just like cruising through life. Plateauing is what I thought.
Yeah, flatlining.
Flatlining. I just didn't feel anything anymore, and I didn't know what it was. And I sort of realized I wasn't a sociopath in that time.
Well, that's a pretty good outcome. There's good self-awareness of yourself.
So I'm like, cool, I'm pretty normal.
What about you?
I think for me, I learned heaps from the experience. I have always, I feel like I've been quite hard in terms of I'm very determined. I work really hard. I'm always the sort of person, especially in my 20s, who even when I wasn't fine, I'd be like, I'm fine. I don't cry. I'm not going to ask for help. And I really went into The Bachelor with that mentality. There were a lot of experiences in that show, especially because I was falling in love with a guy on a TV show, which just felt so I felt so stupid. I was like, what sort of idiot falls in love on a TV show? I thought I'd come in here for a few weeks, have some fun. I thought I'd be home in 2 weeks. Like, I didn't even tell my mum I was doing the show because I genuinely thought I'd be home within 2 weeks. And here I am falling in love with a camera crew around me. So I was very closed off, especially to the producers who were trying to get emotions out of me. And I felt like they were trying to trick me. I was like, I see what's going on here. But now in retrospect and with the beauty of watching the show and hindsight, what I understand they were trying to do is they were trying to get vulnerability out of me. They were trying to show the Australian public that I'm not some hard-ass chick who's just fine and putting it all on for the cameras. And I think I really learned that vulnerability isn't something that people see as a weakness. I always saw it as being really pathetic. But I learned that it's not pathetic at all to show that you're upset about something or to show that you care about something to people, because when you're the person who always shows up with a front of being fine, nobody ever helps you. Everyone always thinks that you don't need the help, even though sometimes you could be in a really dark place in life or you could be really struggling. And so for me, I then noticed that all the girls who were able to articulate their feelings or were able to show that side of themselves,
they're way more loved.
Yeah, the public gets behind that. The public, and not just the public. I don't mean to use it as a tool to try and garner likes or favor, but just it was really something that I could apply to my own life. I really learned that it's okay to show people when you're not okay. And that experience, as much as I had an amazing time and got a husband out of it and so many wonderful things, it was really hard. It's really hard to be in an environment where you feel like you love someone, but you've been pitted against all these other women and people are comparing you physically, saying that you're not pretty enough for them or this person's prettier. It really took a massive hit to my self-esteem after the show and to my self-worth. So I learned that it was okay to express those feelings, and that's really changed me. And it's also impacted the way I raise my kids as well.
They're two really interesting realizations. I mean, you learned about yourself in terms of self-awareness that you're ready to love again and to be loved too, I guess, that's something you learned. And you learned about the importance of expressing your vulnerability.
Totally.
Can I just dig into it a little bit, like if you don't mind?
dig
Go
deep.
away.
Yeah,
Because
get your shovel out.
because they're just concepts that really interest me. Actually, I'm very interested to understand about what you mean by you were ready to love again. Because what do you mean by love? What's that mean? Because I use the word love for everything. I love my dog. I love my car. I love
Oh
my
my God,
job.
my dog. It's my obsession with my dog.
but they're all-
That's what she means. She loves again. She loves her
I
dog.
loved again. I got a dog, yeah.
So because maybe because I could say to you, like, if you're ready to love again, maybe you just get a dog.
Yeah.
And tell me what you meant by that.
That's a really good point, actually. Well done. You're really going to get something deep out of me here, I think.
But that's what this is all about. That's what Straight Talk's about.
Yeah, I didn't think of it like that until you just really pointed it out. I wasn't just ready to love, but I think I was ready to be loved because I had a really rough trot in my personal life. I just briefly mentioned, I was a few years deep in a relationship with someone that I found out was a really bad person. He did some really bad things that I won't ever talk about. Even for legal reasons. Yeah,
Okay,
I actually
alright.
can't. Like not a good human. But the things I can talk about is that he did have this double life and he was it's actually pretty wild. I was 2 years deep when I found out, but the other woman was 6 years with him. So I felt like the other woman, even though I didn't know, because I felt straight away I was more empathetic for her because I thought, wow, like you've spent 6 years setting up this life and you just must think I've flooded in, whereas I still thought I was the only one. But
Flat-bellied homewrecker.
Totally. But her and I ended up, we talked it out and we were great with each other. We both left at the same time. But he, same houses, took us to the same Tiffany's, calling our kids the same names, bought the same dogs, Reddish and Ridgebacks, like wild things. And off the back of that, it got a bit messy. There were some threats flying around, and I developed insomnia because I genuinely thought, hey, this guy's pretty unhinged. He knows everything about me. He had hacked into all my emails, my computers, my Instagram, everything that I had. And I didn't really realize at the time until I started to. I was like, how does he know that? And then I would change my passwords, and then I would see that they'd changed again. So he just kept hacking me. And I just developed this crazy idea that he was going to do something to me. So off the back of that, I had a lot of distrust and I just didn't want.
Any guilt?
Yeah, a lot of guilt. Yeah, I was disgusted at myself, actually, which was the funny thing. I didn't.
But what for? You didn't do anything wrong.
I was so embarrassed. The embarrassment.
Yeah.
The embarrassment ran deep. That
because you felt stupid.
as an intelligent woman, I saw myself as an intelligent woman, and I thought, how did I just fall for that for so many years? And how is there still a part of me that still loves him when I found out? Because you don't switch love off, right? I could hate him and never want to see him again, but it doesn't take away the last 2 years of what you had. So this is when I went on this like very cliche, going to go find myself and travel the world and see who I am couple of years. But I didn't want to date for a long time, and I would self-sabotage without knowing. And this is something that I've learned from all the stuff that Laura and I have dug into over the years.
Oh, yeah.
We speak to so many
I was like, you're
specialists.
doing that thing again. That thing where
I would date very briefly, and the second anyone wanted anything, I would run a mile.
How do you mean want anything?
Anything more serious with me.
Yeah, more commitment.
Oh yeah, I until the last 2 years, I've been a massive commitment phobe, but I always blamed everyone else. It wasn't me.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
like, oh, can you believe? Socks and sandals can't do it. You see the salmon shirt he wore, can't do it. Red flag, but they weren't. They were like, it was me just trying to find anything I could.
it was the classic example of anytime a guy wasn't very interested or actually wasn't really available emotionally,
I wanted
Britt was
them so
like,
bad.
that's the guy I'm in love with. And any like nice, normal guy that was like, hey, you seem awesome. I'm stable. Let's date. Britt was like, I just don't feel anything. He's so boring.
I only ever was
Like, fuck
attracted.
that.
Yeah, I was only attracted
like,
to people I
pattern.
knew I couldn't
Fucking
have.
pattern.
100%. And that was something, that was my issue. That was not these poor men's issue that I was dealing with. It was
Now,
mine.
Britt only dates men who are in other countries, so it's still continued. It's just now continued by location. They're physically not here,
Well,
but they're emotionally
Distance.
very available.
Well, I've had 2 relationships. I'm in a relationship now with someone I love. His name's Ben, but he lives in Scotland.
Amen.
Yeah, but he's the reason I'm in the relationship, not the reason. Ben, sorry, block your ears. That came out wrong. My last relationships are still long distance because I'm so used to being on my own, and I really took my dad's advice of not this is why I wanted you to set yourself up, but also like he wanted to put me in a position, and he used this example when I was young, when I was 18, and my parents are 45 years married in love, like they have a great relationship. But he always said, we're just the apple of his eye. I get emotional thinking about my dad. I feel like I could cry. But he always said, if you're in a marriage or a relationship that goes wrong, I need to know and I want you to know that you can leave and you don't get stuck because you can't. You don't get stuck because you don't have an income or a job or in control. He's like, I just want to make sure you're in a position that you could walk out that door and be okay. And that's all he really wanted to instill in my sister and I. And he did that. Went off track there because we were talking about love. But love you, Dad. But I just, I finally realized that I just wanted someone to look after me for a minute. And that sounds really selfish, but I spent my whole life on my own basically and looking after everyone else. And I was like, I'm exhausted. Like, I just want someone to pat my head and tell me I'm okay. Like, it's going to be okay. And it sounds so childlike, but sometimes
we got plenty of child in us, all of us.
Yeah, it does sound childlike, but sometimes you want someone to just say, it's going to be all right. And I'm here. And I was ready for someone to say, I'm here for you.
Because, we don't have to be grown up, like we keep getting told we're grown-ups or adults, we have to act a certain way. But we have a lot of child still in us. And there is nothing wrong with wanting to just get a pat on the head and be told you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that,
No.
especially when you need it. I mean, you were talking about vulnerability before, but that's the sort of thing we have to accept about ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm no psychologist. I'm not great at all this sort of stuff, relationship stuff. But I do know, I have learnt that after a long, long time and lots of mistakes, that you have to be prepared to accept your vulnerability. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's no point being like the tough guy, in my case, walking through doors and stuff like that. Never think I'm ever going to need any help.
Well, it makes you lonely is what it makes you.
Well,
It
you'll
makes
end up
you
being on your own. That doesn't mean you're lonely,
is not
though.
lonely though.
Yeah, I was going to say because there's a big difference.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's okay to be on your own. Like just in terms of your case, Britt, like
I love being alone.
well, I was going to say what's very interesting about what you just said. I don't see any issue with having a relationship where the dude, in your case, is living in Scotland and you don't live in the same house. You live distance from each other, but you meet, I don't know, however many times, you talk however many times, you text or whatever it is. That type of relationship, that suits some people.
Yeah.
100%.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You don't have to be like mum and dad. Like you don't have to be like the setup that we've all got used to as growing up as kids in most cases. Not in your case, but in her case.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, there's people like you who find that relationship where you can, I presume you live on the same roof with your husband. Yeah. So where you live together and, you raise kids together and you're sort of in each other's lives a lot more. There's a lot to be said about, though. I think we need to challenge the traditional forms of a relationship. And I think we're at a period in time where that is being challenged.
Well, I definitely think it's a learned character trait as well that we have. I wasn't always like that. I was in a relationship for 8 years and we lived together. We had a house together. And when we broke up in the early days, I didn't want to be alone because I never had. But then when I made the choice and I learned to love it, I'm not a lonely person. I love being on my own. I could not speak to someone. Now, this is crazy because my job is speaking, radio, podcasting, movie, entertainment, everything. I could not speak to someone for a week and be fine. I could just speak to my dog for a week. I am quite introverted for an extrovert. The world perceives me as an extrovert. But yeah, I don't ever get lonely, to be honest. I can get what I need from my dog or from one interaction or coming to work with Laura and we have a chat. That's enough for me. I get depleted when I spend more time with people, whereas some people fill their cup with people.
Does that mean, from your point of view, that when you are in the public gaze, it's more of a performance?
No, because I love it. It's not a performance at all. I am that person.
For that time.
Yeah, I'm that person for that time. But and actually I've heard a lot of people in the industry speak like that. I remember Robin Williams. I don't know. I love him. I don't know why he comes to mind, but he was very much like that. And he was the opposite person at home. And we know that he wasn't actually an overly happy person, even though he perceived himself like that. But I don't fake anything. I'll be the life of the party.
Not faking. No.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, that's one way you could look at it. But no, I don't mean faking, but you know it needs to be done. Like Robin Williams, and I'm performing. That's what they're looking for. That's my audience. So I get paid for.
Yeah.
And I'm going to speak to my audience with respect and give them what they expect.
Well, I think the thing is, I thrive off, we only speak to people really that we're genuinely interested in. And I thrive off that. If I have a genuine curiosity on something, I'm going to be there. And I love to entertain and make people laugh. So when I'm on, I'm on. But man, when I'm off.
But I also think it's a reflection of the fact that because we do work in media and we are on all the time in terms of our work, that sometimes it takes a lot of you, like even as a person who is extroverted, it takes all of that. And so I think that, I get to the end of my Mondays where we do podcasting all day, then radio all day. I can't speak, I'm mute because there's nothing left in the tank to talk about, and that can be hard for the people that you then have to go home to, hard for your partner or your kids or, at the moment, I'm doing training. You guys, you'll know about it.
You can talk about that because it'll be out. Yeah.
I'm doing Dancing with the Stars, but I'm training on a Monday night. I can't even talk to my dance partner at all. There's no words left in my body. And I think that is just a reflection from the work that we do requires us to be on. And that's amazing because when we're on, we're on. But then when you're off, you're like a zombie.
Yeah, well, that's an important realization. Know when to act that way. In other words, when to turn off and to give yourself a time to recharge. What do you consider love to be, either receiving or giving? It doesn't have to be two ways. And I don't mean that in a way that you're being used up, but is there an expectation that the level of love that you want to give, you expect to get back?
Love for me, I think, equates to the people I'm willing to give my time to, because I think time is a commodity that is priceless and we don't ever get back. And when you're running businesses and living busy lives, who you choose to give your energy and time to when you don't have much is love. Who you choose to go above and beyond for. I have a very small group of people in my life. I'm not one of those people with a million friends. I could count them on two hands. But I will give the shirt off my back to those people. They're the people that I know I could call at 4 a.m. in the morning and ask for help. And conversely, they're the people that I know would call me and say, hey, I need help. And I don't say, what have you done? I just say, what do you need? Because the reason they've asked for help doesn't matter. And I think that's a real sign of love is, it's irrelevant what they've done. They've asked you for help. What is it that I can do? And then we'll deal with the reason later. Wow. I've actually had to bail a friend out of prison before. I don't think I've told you this. I had a friend and it was a speeding thing. It wasn't bad, but he called me at 3 a.m. once. I woke up so disoriented, answered the phone, and he said, I need you to pick me up bail me out of a jail 3 hours away. I had to be at hospital, not that long away, 3 hours away. And I was like, okay, cool. Are you ready if I leave now? And I just remember thinking, it doesn't matter what they've done right now. I'll go and get him and then we'll deal with it later. But I think that's love, who you choose to give your energy and time to.
And it doesn't equate to being in love. But
no.
I mean, it just means you love someone. Like you can, as I said, you can love your kids, your dog, your mother, your father, your friends, the priest or the church, if you're part of a church community or just in my case, people who work with me, you can have a sense of love. There's lots of different degrees, but it is something that the word unfortunately gets too often used, but there's no rules. And there shouldn't be any rules. And
sometimes it doesn't make sense.
The rules are ridiculous, and which is that's why The Bachelor is a bit of an unusual show for me. But but because it's sort of like everyone's expecting it to be your sort of love, like the storybook type love. Like you go on the show, you fall in love with somebody, actually, for all the right reasons, and you live happily ever after. Touch wood, that's how it happens for you. And I guess you probably should say something about your view on this point too.
Well, I feel like it's that as well. It could be an assumption from the outset. I think if you look at our relationship and you look at how we met, you would think that it is the story tale love. But it took me a long time to get to that sort of relationship. Like I said, my mum was a single mum, 3 kids. But she unknowingly and without sort of like the right tools in her toolkit to do relationships, my whole upbringing was modeled really bad relationships. That was my exposure to what love was. Love was the way you felt about someone. It was chemistry. It was toxic. It was really volatile. And that permeated all of my previous relationships. I thought love was a feeling. I thought didn't matter what happened. If you love someone enough, you would overcome anything. And that is how I always showed up in my relationships. I stayed far too long with people who cheated or treated me poorly. And it was meeting my partner who is completely not the person I ever would have chosen in the real world. Like I would have met Matt and thought, he's too nice, he's too available, and he's made it too
stable.
easy. I would have been the version of when I say Britt would meet someone and say, oh, I don't have any chemistry. I think had I met Matt under a different circumstance, I would have had that feeling towards him. But also now that I break it down and I think about it, there was the competition element of being on The Bachelor. There was still something that made it volatile in our initial meeting. And then also afterwards, the volatility didn't come from the relationship, but it came from the public scrutiny. It came from my feelings about myself after the show. So that still added that drama that I had been addicted to. And then over the next 12 months, it was Matt modeling what a great relationship was for me that really changed my perspective on what love is. And I now understand that it's not a feeling anymore. It's not about the chemistry that we have or the attraction that we have for each other, even though that exists. For me, it's about the safety that I feel in my relationship. It's about the stability that we have. It's about him showing up for our children in a way that I didn't experience as a kid. My entire understanding of what love is has been shaped from my now relationship. And, you know, I'm so grateful for him for that because he was patient with me as well.
You also, by the sound of it, tried to understand you. Because,
Yeah,
I mean, I think love is a
100%.
lot about understanding the other person. I mean, what do they want? And them understanding you back and what can you provide, which is not necessarily what they want. So, like, it's how do I sort of understand everything about you and how do you understand everything about me? And then can we meet each other's expectations?
Totally.
And sometimes you have to compromise on things. And it's about compromising all the time. Continual compromise.
Yeah. And about I feel like for us, one of the big things is we work in the same industries. We're both very driven people, but we're not competing for the same stuff. Like I feel like he's my biggest cheerleader and we talk about it all the time. I think for some relationships, it could be threatening to a partner, especially in a heterosexual relationship, to the male partner to have to be married to someone who is so business orientated and is so you can
say it's successful.
Well, yeah, I hate it.
Without jealousy.
Without any jealousy.
Or envy.
And like at the moment, you know, he's the one who's doing the lion's share of the parenting with our children. He's doing so much with our kids. And I hate the term like he's so hands-on because he's not hands-on. He literally is doing everything and I'm the one going to work. And I think that sometimes in some relationships that could breed resentment because of the traditional norms that we've been led to believe, which is, you know, mum does 70%, dad does 30%. And that is the case for a lot of households. Whereas in our family, especially at the moment, Matt does 80% of the parenting and I'm doing 20%. And that's just because of our work dynamics. And then I know in the future that will shift again.
Do you have to compensate for that? I mean,
In what ways?
in terms of relationships, like do you...
Just have more sex.
I have to put out more.
Yeah, no, but then you say I'm too tired.
Yeah. I got to keep the man happy. Otherwise, no, I think we compensate in different ways in terms of our working relationships are very fluid. So, I might go through a real peak of quite intense work, and then I'll step back into the majority parenting load, and he will have a peak. So he, for example, was hosting a TV series pre-COVID, then that got axed because it was a travel series. And so then my work kind of, podcasting grew during COVID. And so we've just had these ebbs and flows between whose work is the priority and who is taking parenting priority. And so far we've been able to navigate it pretty well, but I'm sure there'll be a time where both things will be flaring at the same time, and then we'll have to come up with a solution.
So do you think therefore you and him have both got to be good managers? And I guess communication is like really critical.
Yeah, he manages me. So I'm chaos personified. I'm the sort of person who has schedules, tries to keep everything in my head, doesn't really know how to use a calendar. And he's the one who kind of manages me and my chaoticness, which I'm sure is an unfair load that he has to carry from time to time. But he's he's super creative, but he's also quite a personality type. So he's quite good at being organized. And I am so far the other end of the spectrum that, I don't know, I think sometimes he finds it endearing and sometimes he finds it infuriating in equal measures.
What happens when you have an argument? Like, what do you do? Like,
don't talk for 3 days.
No, we don't. No, we don't hold grudges. We're so quick to resolve stuff. Actually, the opposite. We the only thing that we ever really argue about is tone. So like if someone says something in with a tone that's not nice, because we don't yell at each other, we don't swear at each other, we don't like the things that we get angry at each other about would be me saying at the park like, I thought you were doing this, but it's said with a tone. That's offensive. And when you actually break down what the argument's about, they're always so fucking dumb.
Totally.
So as things usually we get to the 20-minute mark after being a bit panicky with each other, and we'd be like, okay, this is what we're actually arguing about, and it's irrelevant. But very rarely at the moment do we have big blow-ups about anything that's substantial. So I feel very grateful for that. It's always about stupid shit, and it usually comes off the back of being tired or overworked, or, there's usually a deficit somewhere else, and it's being communicated in a very unproductive way.
But it's also when you get not you, but in relationships, when you're tired all the time and you're stressed, you pick fights at the most ridiculous
Totally tiredness.
things.
Yeah, you just, and it's not their
After
fault.
6 p.m.
Also, I think it's when you project. I think where arguments often stem from as well, and in that sort of case, and for us, it's like when you project how you think the other person's supposed to respond to something.
Yeah.
So if they respond in a way that doesn't align with the person you want them to be, then you feel annoyed at them because you're like, oh, well, I expected this. But you also have to be very aware and self-aware that like they're not an extension of you. They are a very autonomous person who is their own person, and they're allowed to have thoughts, ideas, and reactions to things that aren't in alignment with the way that you think. And that's definitely like knowing that, and knowing that Matt doesn't, he's not doing things to purposely make me angry or make me upset. Like
Why would he?
Exactly. It doesn't help him. And he truly is such a bloody stand-up husband. So sometimes when I'm feeling frustrated at him for whatever he's done, breaking it down and going, oh, the problem's me. It's not him, it's me.
The problem, it's me.
And that's good self-awareness, but it's come from many, many years. And also I think like the biggest gift of doing Life Uncut is just how much we've learned about relationships over the years. It's been 4 years of learning about what constitutes a good relationship. It's 4 years of learning about like how to better communicate, and we've been able to create the content, but it's also meant that we've had to do the work on ourselves. And I really think that it's for both of us has been so beneficial with how we navigate our relationships.
So let's talk more about Life Uncut, because I want to jump into that. Why did you decide to do that podcast? Why did you call it Life Uncut? And then why was it the two of you?
So we met post-Bachelor. What happened was
because we were on different seasons.
Yeah.
Have we made that clear to
Yeah,
everyone?
Brittany has never made out with
Matt
my
did not dump
partner.
me. I did not.
No, so Britt was on the season after me, and when it was my season, Alex Nation, she was the final girl who was on the season before me, on Richie's season, which was season 5, I think. When she found out, or when she started to see the edit and realized I was the girl at the end, and she also saw the social media that I was copying, and also the way that the edit was being portrayed, because the other thing that happens on The Bachelor, if you're the final girl, so the person that he chooses at the end, there will always be some jeopardy that's thrown into your storyline. So you don't get the 100% hero edit. There's always, you're nice. Something will happen that will throw the public off the scent of you. So it might be that you've done something or said something that's a little bit controversial, not too controversial, but controversial enough to get a few people offside. And then you're nice again, because then you win back the audience. If you're number 2 girl, you're just the golden horse the whole race. Like, people want you to be amazing the whole time. So it then becomes, when you have that little bit of jeopardy in your storyline, the public turn on you. Oh, we've finally seen the real you. It's that sort of narrative switch. So Alex Nation messaged me during my season and she was like, I know it's you at the end. I want you to know that you're going to be okay. I know you think that people aren't in support of you right now, but the tide will change again and people will get behind you. And it was a really kind of nice reassurance from someone who had walked the path before that things were going to be okay. And so when I watched Britt's season and I saw the same thing happening to Britt, I reached out to her and I was like doing my, passing of the baton basically. And I was like, hey, here's my number. I understand what's happening. I know you think that everyone hates you. They don't. The mob moves on. And, in a couple of weeks' time, it'll all be fine. And I was like, call me if you need anything. She called me within 30 seconds.
I didn't know her. I was like, oh my God, how did you know? I'm in my room crying. I haven't left for like 5 days.
I was like, I bet you're in tears. I bet you haven't left your house. And I would put money on it that you're reading every single comment.
Well, because if you haven't been in the public eye before, which we had not, we were nobodies. I don't even think I have an Instagram. And then all of a sudden you are copping so much trolling and hate. We're 6 years, 5 years deep, that was that long ago, and it still affects us now when you read some trolling and hate. So back then, when it feels like the whole country is against you, it's really tough. So we sort of became friends, to fast forward, but not great friends. We just were like
more acquaintances.
Yeah, when I'm in Sydney, because I didn't live in Sydney, I was in a country town. When I'm in Sydney, we'll get breakfast, we'll go for a walk. So I think we'd only hung out 3 times for like brekkie walks in Bondi. And I'd always known I wanted to start a podcast, always, but I didn't ever know how or who with or what I would do. I just knew that I wanted to have a bigger platform to help people. And then it was one day over breakfast that we were sharing our traumatic stories.
Well, we were talking about our relationships over breakfast. Britt was telling me about her dating the guy who had multiple relationships.
The sociopath.
Yeah.
The sociopath. I was telling her about a guy I dated who was a sex addict and I didn't know at the time. And so we had very similar stories.
Like real, for real, sex addict.
Yeah, like undiagnosed, but I mean, he was cheating on me with 30
Multiple
women.
women,
He cheated on his ex-wife with multiple women. So like it was very obvious that there was
sex addict or just like wanker.
Some like real deep-seated issues there. Many visits to couples therapy and psychologists, it didn't really help. But basically we were like, we had some very similar things that happened in our past relationships. And I had also wanted to do a podcast, but hadn't really thought about who kind of knew what I liked to talk about. Like I was always really interested in relationships and was always the advice giver, but could never take the advice. Like was so good at giving advice to my friends and telling them how they should navigate relationships and was so monumentally messed up in my own. But then we had this breakfast this one day and we had such a great chat. And Britt messaged me afterwards and she was like, I think we should do a podcast together. I think we should do this.
Marry me.
And
I was like, this is because we also didn't know each other well, but we had a really great chemistry.
Yeah. We bounced off each other so well. We had so much fun together.
Yeah.
But at the time I was 8 months pregnant and the idea of starting another business on top of the business I already had, I was like, all right, how am I going to do this? But Britt was incredibly persistent and she was like, she was like, we need to lay an episode. Neither of us knew how to podcast. We didn't know how to record.
We literally
the roadcasters didn't exist then, not in this format. So we like had the big garage band and everything. Anyway, Britt was like, we need to lay an episode down before
you have a baby.
Yeah, she didn't say this in so many words, but I know now what she was thinking. She was like, we have to get this down pat before she has this baby or it's never going to get off the ground. And so we got 2 episodes down before Marley was born and then they were released. And so I was like signed up and had to do it. So it was locked and loaded.
Locked you down.
So then we launched Life Uncut pretty much, like throughout.
But how'd you work out the format? Like
trial and error.
Yeah, just go for it.
We the early days we chopped and changed a lot because you know what? We actually didn't think anyone was going to listen. When you say you can't open another business, I didn't look at it like a business. We didn't earn $1 from that for 12 months. Yeah. It was a real passion project. And I think that's the reason it's successful 4 years later is because it was passion and we loved it. But we still tweak now. We still want to listen to what the listeners want and the audience want. And if we think we need to change something, we'll do it 100%.
But we both, I mean, the thing that I love about Britt and working together, I'm very much in terms of business. Like, I'm not a procrastinator. I'm not someone who needs to get a product perfect before going to market. And if I was that person, I never ever would have gotten Tony May off the ground. It is my jewelry business is a completely different business 15 years later to what it was when I started in terms of aesthetic, design, everything. And it's gotten incredibly, like, you wouldn't even recognize the two if you were to compare. But the same with podcasting. I think so many people procrastinate because they think they need to have a product perfect before they launch it, and then they never ever do anything. And the thing that I love about Britt is we're both so, you know what, that is good enough. Let's get it out there and let's make it better. And that was how we approached the first episode. The first episode, the audio
Don't ever
was
listen.
trash. It was like we recorded it in a tunnel, but we tried to re-record it on better audio, but the content wasn't as good because it wasn't new, it wasn't authentic. We were just kind of rerunning the things we'd already said.
Trying to make the same jokes.
It just
was
didn't
like-
feel real. So we were like, you know what? Whatever. We'll put out a disclaimer saying that we didn't know what we were doing and the audio will be better next week. And it was better next week. And then it's just gotten better and better ever since. So we've always worked on building and making the product better.
So how many episodes have you guys got through now?
Oh, 400.
400,
400, yeah.
It's funny because I remember when it started, we were like, no one's going to listen to this. I remember we released the first episode. We literally pressed release, forgot about it. Didn't even, we're like, it's not even going to chart. And then the next day I got a message saying, congrats on number 1. And I was like, number 1 what? They're like, podcast. I was like, what do you mean? They're like, what do you mean? What do I mean? What do you mean? I was like, they're like, you're number 1 in the country. And we were like, what?
Who's listening to this trash?
We were like, what? And I called her and I was like, did you know? She's like, what the fuck?
I was like, we really need to fix that audio before next week. This is terrible.
So then we had no choice then to roll. We were like, oh shit, this is a thing.
Yeah.
Like, people are listening. We better keep going. And then 4 years later, we kept going.
Yeah. And also on that, I mean, the big thing with like, once we knew that the content was stuff that people, you know, and it wasn't just stuff that people were listening to because they were having fun. Like, we were learning and people were learning at the same time. And we were doing stuff that we were so interested in. And I think the big driver for us, it was that we absolutely loved creating this podcast. We loved connecting with the listeners that we had. And so when Britt says, you know, we didn't make $1 for the first year, we were truly just doing it weekly, twice weekly for the love of it. And I think that really rang true for so many people who were listening to it. They knew that it was just these two chicks giving it a crack rather than this perfectly polished production, that the intention behind it was to be a revenue maker.
Oh, like I would come to the recordings in my scrubs after a 12-hour night shift and Laura would have a baby strapped to a breastfeeding. And that's how we would do it. And I think that the relatability in that is really what helped gain an audience, because we really were just two really normal, relatable people
who did not know
shit.
what they were doing.
Yeah.
And but now you're not doing that. You're not coming in that way. Now it's run as in a professional sense. You're on a network. You're part of a network, ARN or something, aren't you? Like
we are. So we work with ARN, but ARN are our mother agency, who we also do radio with. But in terms of us creating, it's just Brittany, myself, and Keisha. The three of us are the show.
ARN wouldn't know what episodes were coming out.
Yeah.
They don't, not that they don't care, but they know that we run ourselves.
Yeah. And so when it comes to, you know, I guess like a lot of people who, once they get to a big scale, they sell out in terms of, you know, handing over production, because it makes your life easier, right? When you have a whole team doing it.
Yep.
But we have always been so fiercely protective of not just our community, but also of our content, that we want to, I still edit. So Keisha edits the episodes and I re-edit every episode that goes out, because I want to make sure that when we're the mouthpiece for something, that I'm so proud of what's going out every single week. And that's been the case since day dot.
Yeah, but do you think that, like, I've been through all the various processes.
I've
been through all the processes because I was with Southern Cross Austereo for a while.
Yeah.
And they produced everything for me. And also found advertising, that other sort of stuff, revenue type thing, which is good. But I ended up buying them out because we sort of outgrew them, and now I have my own team. And I feel much more comfortable with my own team, because I like you, I like to be able to control what's going on. I don't want someone to say, well, Mike, this is your guest because we're doing a radio thing with this particular organisation.
Totally.
And that's what's always been so important to us. We don't, because we've been able to maintain autonomy over all of our content, even though we work alongside and Aaron are incredibly supportive of us, they don't change our content. We have absolute right of say over everything, and that has been the most important thing to us because that's what makes it authentic.
Laura, you run a successful jewellery business called Tony Mate. You've got kids, you've got a relationship, which also you've got to manage relationships, and then you're doing the podcast and the radio. I mean, how do you do all this stuff?
I think firstly, I want to say, because I think it sets a really unrealistic, it sets a really unrealistic expectation for mums, firstly. And I'm very, very aware, I often get mums who message me who are like, I'm struggling with 2 kids and I'm not working and I don't know how you do it. Because I think that sometimes you can look in and think it looks so easy. It's really not easy. It's some weeks are incredibly challenging, but I also know that I've kind of done this to myself. So I'm not sitting out here complaining, being like, oh, my life is so hard. I'm so grateful for the opportunities I have at the moment. But I'm also incredibly grateful for the absolutely freaking amazing team I've built around me. And that's the thing with Tony May. So we have now in Sydney, we probably have about 10 employees, which is not huge by any means, but globally, we probably have closer to 50 employees now. And I think the big thing is my sister came on board. So after The Bachelor happened, my sister, she used to run an experiential marketing company that she had part ownership in. That relationship that she had with her business owner had basically, they just come to a point where it was probably best for them to start to look to do other things. And even though that business was really successful, Alicia wasn't feeling fulfilled in it anymore. And she, when I was in the Batch Mansion, she took over Tony May for those 3 months because I was away from my business for 3 whole months. And she helped. She's not creative, but she's incredibly business minded. And so after the show, she sat down with me and she was like, look, I want buy-in. What can I do to get a portion of the company and we can do this together? And she was like, I'll take care of business and you do the creative. And that has been the most incredible business decision I think I've ever made. Sometimes you have to give up a little bit to gain a lot. And she now works full time. She does all the business side, and that gave me the opportunity to just focus on the creative. And now I do all the designs, but I don't have to do the day-to-day running of the business or the staff logistics or any of the other stuff that takes so much time. And it's allowed me to not work in the business, but work on the business. And I think that is the same for pretty much every single business that I work on. With Life Uncut, I used to be doing all the editing. We used to be so bogged down in the sort of semantics of the content, whereas now then we employed Keisha and she is incredible. And Keisha does the lion's share of that work now, whereas I just have to do the final finessing of it. So I think like for me, the only reason why I'm able to do all the things that I do is because I have incredible people around me who make it possible, and they make it look like it's so easy for me. And it's because they all work so incredibly hard to make it happen.
It seems like to me that you've laid out on a table all the pieces and then you've sort of arranged them in a very structured way. You say you're creative, but I also think you're very structured because you've got experts or people anyway that you trust looking after various parts of your life. You've got your husband looking after the kids.
Yeah.
You've got your sister.
I'm a delegator now, baby.
Well, you saw that's how it's come across.
She's a puppeteer. She's like, I don't know.
Well, I didn't want to say puppeteer, but because that sounds a bit manipulative. But it doesn't matter. It is important to manipulate the situation to the best of everybody, not just yourself.
Yeah, but I think also when you are somebody who has not just running small businesses, but when you are an entrepreneur, you can't run the businesses. You can't be in everything. You are the person that powers it from behind. And and not to be like I'm the visionary of Tony May, but like I'm the creative director of Tony May. The way Tony May looks and feels and the way people wear it and they respond to the brand story, that is all me. But
and how you respond to markets. You've got to respond to changes because you said that Tony May today is a lot different than what it was when you first kicked it off.
Totally.
That's all about you responding and refining and making sure you meet the market.
Absolutely.
So you become a scientist around the science of understanding where the market's going.
And
predictor.
Yeah, and also I've been in retail for 16 years now. So I understand how retail has shifted, how it's gone from being very much a you walk in and purchase in store to being an online experience and to being a social media experience. Like I've seen those developments. And I think that for me, the thing that's so incredible between Life Uncut, Tony May, my media work is that all of those businesses work as an ecosystem as well. Life Uncut in ways helps Tony May because of profile building. I get to wear my jewelry, people see me wear it, and then that kind of helps to build that part of my business. And it all just works as this beautiful little ecosystem together. But in order for that to happen, you've got to have the right people in place to be the engine of each of those companies.
Do you sit back admiring her?
Oh, she's an absolute boss woman.
She thinks I'm insane. But then, we wrote the book last year, and there's always extra things to do that kind of just fall into place, and you've got to kind of arrange your life around these new experiences.
We're suckers for saying yes, and
then figure out how to do
it.
it.
But it's good to say yes and then backfill and say, okay, we've said yes, we've got to do it now.
Yeah,
and this is how we'll do it.
Yeah, it's important to note though for anyone listening at home that thinks that we do go and do all this extra stuff. Life Uncut, the only reason we were able to do that and take it on at the time, because I was obviously doing other work too, is because it was a medium that we could do at midnight if we wanted to.
Totally.
We didn't have to have a 9-to-5 store that we had to go to. We could do it at 6 a.m. We could do it whenever we wanted. That's the reason. That's the reason we were here.
Sort of like a side hustle.
And we just, when an opportunity comes up, if I've got a show that I want to go and film or a movie or Laura's got a show she's filming, we just work around it. We're like, cool, that schedule's out the window because you've got your show. Let's do it next week at midnight. Like there's always a way around something. And we definitely have had times where we've had to bend over for the other person, but that's compromise. That's life. And that's that's why we're such good friends. And
that's a really good point you just made then, because a lot of people say, "Oh, I want to do a podcast. I think I need to do a podcast. I love to do a podcast because I want to be like you guys. I want to be an entertainer. I want to be creative. I want to talk to an audience, build an audience." But what they don't realize is people like you had your jobs or your businesses, which then you could do the thing on the side. And as the thing on the side became bigger and bigger and bigger, it took over your jobs, or alternatively got equal amount of time. And I think that process takes a long time too. It doesn't happen in your case, it might have happened in a year or two, but most cases it takes years.
Well, I did 2 years. I worked COVID in emergency. I worked the whole of COVID because we were short. The hospital staff needed people, which wasn't that long ago. So it's only probably the last 2 years, I'd say, where I gave up that life because it's a real stress when you have had an income that's guaranteed every week. You know what you're going to get.
Totally.
To go into something where we're like, what if we don't earn any money?
Totally.
Because we weren't earning money. But it got to the point where it was so big that we didn't have a choice anymore, and neither of us were sleeping. We weren't, and that sounds dramatic, but it's not, because I would finish 12-hour shift and then I'd have to start a business day for life. I was the business person. So then I would start that, and that wasn't paid. And I think people think you can get into podcasting and it's so easy. You get behind a mic, you talk some shit.
You don't prep. You just rock up.
And I think that's where people go wrong, is that they don't realize that it's a full-time job, and it's very important that you think about what you're doing, and it's a career now.
And where's the money coming from too? Because you go to a podcast, you got to earn money out of it.
Totally.
There's a model. There's lots of different models in podcasting, but you've got to make sure you earn a quid out of it. And if you're not, you got to do it as a side hustle. And as you say, you can end up working 20 hours a day.
In the first 14 months, and I remember I called Laura, we earned $2,500 each, and I called her and I said, we just got a $5,000 advertiser, and we're like, woo!
$2,500 over 14 months. But we were still doing it. But we loved it. And I think the big thing is we're such good friends that we got to go and do something as friends.
Yeah.
And I had just been thrown into this new experience of being a mum, and I wasn't seeing many people, and I was only really working and being a mum. And so it was my opportunity to have adult conversations. Like I absolutely just loved our moments, even if they're in the middle of the night, of being able to sit down and talk about something, because I felt like I was still learning, felt like I was not just, learning about being a mom. I was also still doing something else that made me feel really interested. But one of the big things about it, I think, is that, and talking just about business in general, is I think successes are so obvious. You see them on social media. You can see when people are kicking goals. You see that someone's released a book, or they've signed up for a new TV show, or their podcast has gone to #1, or they won a podcast award. But what you don't see is the years and all of the unpaid hours and all of the sacrifices that go into getting to that point. And I think it makes it seem so easy. and so easily come by. But I know for us particularly, like Life Uncut was definitely not born overnight, even though that first episode went so well. To get to where we are now and to get to sort of the 50 million download mark, it's been this 4-year journey, which we've had alongside our listeners, which is really incredible.
Yeah, and by the way, most people don't realise you had a head start. You're both on The Bachelor. I had a head start. I had TV shows of my own. It took me 3 years before I earned $1.
Yeah,
on the podcast.
On my podcast, 3 years.
See, people,
and you have a platform.
And I had a head start, a big head start.
Well, it's also the fact that podcasting is years behind in Australia to anywhere else in the world.
But you've got to be first too. So now
Yes.
it's a crowded territory. And so if you want to kick one off now, you're going to go into a really crowded territory. Whereas if you've been like we have been, we've been at it for a while now. So we've got a little bit of an advantage over everybody. But I'm not trying to discourage people from doing a podcast because like you, I think, well, the most important thing I get out of doing the Mentor podcast and this Straight Talk podcast, which I'm doing with you today, is I'm continually learning from everybody.
Totally.
And you know, you're relatively speaking to me anyway, you're two young people, probably don't have anywhere near the life experience that I have. But I learned something from you guys today, and I learned something from everybody every single time. And
it's
like,
a privilege to sit down with people and have intimate conversations. You know, it's like you don't get to do this in your normal life.
No, totally.
I mean, meet a stranger and talk about things that are important to you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It is a privilege. Like I had Angela White on here. And she's a porn star, one of the biggest porn stars on OnlyFans. And I learned a lot from just talking to her about ethics and morality, about being a porn star, and it's a business and there's nothing wrong with it. And not that I had a view on it before, but I learnt some stuff from her and her views on it. And I think that for me it's a great privilege, and I learn every single time about people. And no matter how old they are.
And it's so interesting.
Oh my God.
It's
like
so interesting.
that's the biggest part I get from it. So if you're going to do a podcast, make sure that you understand the reason you're going into it. And go in for the right reasons.
Totally.
Don't go in because you're going to make money.
Because you're not. You're not going to make money for a
you
very long
won't.
time.
Yeah.
And don't go because you want to be famous. And don't go in because you want to have a bigger Instagram account and maybe spread your position, like your popularity. And don't go into it if you're sensitive too, because people comment on what they think about you.
Totally.
Oh, each week people hate one of us. Like
what do you do? How do you feel about that?
Sometimes it's challenging to feel as though you've been misunderstood. I think that's the biggest one, is like if somebody writes a review or something where they're upset about something that I've said, or they've taken something out of context, I feel upset that I have been misunderstood. But then sometimes I haven't been misunderstood. They just don't like what I had to say. And I think it really creates a thick skin. And I mean, we've been in the industry now for 7 years off the back of being on The Bachelor. And we've been through so many moments of where it is challenging that I think every time something happens where it just creates a thicker skin. It makes you more resilient.
Do you think that's good though?
No, not necessarily, but
I think it is.
When I say thicker skin, I mean to people whose opinions you don't know.
Yeah,
I care about what my family and my friends think of me.
Yep.
I deeply care what they think of me, but I don't care what a stranger who hasn't followed, who maybe heard one thing out of context or read one thing about me, and they read a headline and they didn't even listen to where that content came from.
Because they think you're applying that to them.
They've made a decision about who I am because they've read something. And like, for example, Daily Mail ran an article recently about, I told a story on the podcast, which was a funny story about my daughter. We're in the shower and she afterwards very excitedly told Dad that she wanted to have a big fat hairy vagina like her mum. Great, right? Hilarious.
Kids are great.
And you know what, everyone? It's actually not that big and not that fat and not that hairy, but to a 3-year-old, it's all those things.
But also, don't let lies get in the way of a good story.
Like, absolutely. A bit of embellishment.
Yeah.
Anyway, Daily Mail writes a big article about how I was talking about my big fat hairy vagina with no context in the headline whatsoever. So of course I have people writing to me being like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, why would you? And I'm like, listen to where it came from. Listen to the context. Listen to the humor.
And remember, it's a Daily Mail has written it.
Totally. But we know now that like so many people get their news and get their content from headlines. They don't even read the full article. And by doing that, you get an impression of someone. You start to think that you like or dislike someone, but that impression has been completely made by sound bites.
I just get upset.
So I don't take it as much to heart.
I get upset because there is not one bone in our body that wants to offend or upset or bully anyone ever. In 400 episodes, we have not done that. Our sole purpose is to entertain, make people feel less alone, educate, and support women and bring them up. And in 400 plus episodes, that's all we've done. And when you hear people fabricate stories, manipulate a story, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, and the feedback
or something
is
taken out of context. It's not to
why
say that it's
unintentional,
it's like sometimes it may not be your intention, but something you say may offend someone because they've lived a different life, they've walked a different journey.
But it is never the intention. And when you feel like you've dedicated your life to helping people and wanting to help people, and then somebody tries to character assassinate you, it's when it upsets me, because I'm like, wow, I've literally dedicated my life to trying to help people, and for you to just try and completely change that for whatever reason, Tall Poppy, something going on in their life, that's when it's upsetting. Yeah, that's the only time it really bothers
But it's part
me.
of the territory too.
Absolutely.
100%. And you know, someone wise once said, probably Obama, I don't know. But like, you're successful when you start to get the hate, because when you're small, the people that are coming along your journey are everyone that loves you. But when
They're
you're
cheerleaders.
when you get big enough to get the hate, it's, you know, people like you've made it. And I'm not saying we've made it, but when our platform is so large, of course there's going to be people that don't agree with us. So it is 100% part of the territory, yeah.
I have a funny story about the Daily Mail.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, only one?
No,
About your big fat
well,
hairy
no doubt
vagina?
they'll be listening. But I was one time went to the gym down the road here, and I got changed. I thought I'd walk up to the markets that are open up on a Saturday morning up in Potts Point, and so I got my gym gear off, walked up, and I bought a drink or something like that. And I was walking down through Macleay Street, and this dude standing there, and he had a camera, and he was looking at me. So, and I in those days I was boxing a lot, and I was sort of a bit, you know, feeling like I probably didn't get rid of all my energy in the match.
Light as a feather.
So I went down and I said, "What are you doing with the camera, mate?" Because I thought he was looking at me. You know, I thought he was watching me. And he said, "Oh no, I'm here. I'm photographing old architecture." And he said, "In the school here, which is a girls' school, St. Vincent's or whichever one it was." He said, "It's really interesting for me." And I said, "Oh, okay, cool." I bought it, okay. And then I went to my car and I drove home. Anyway, that day, my sons who look at the Daily Mail sent me a photograph of me, and they said there's numerous photographs of me that were in the Daily Mail, but the photograph that really pissed me off was me walking across the road as I was going across the road towards the guy with a really angry face on myself, and my fly was completely undone.
That's the old architecture.
Gave him.
He wasn't lying.
And and I was
That
sort
was
of
a different tower he was taking photos of. Sorry.
I was pretty pissed off, but at the end of the day, like, my boys were just laughing at me. I have 4 sons, and they were just laughing their heads off at it. So, and I think sometimes you got to just take the piss out of yourself. You know,
100%.
Don't take yourself too seriously.
No.
Absolutely. And it comes with the territory. I think like you, and I'm very aware of this in terms of like, you cannot have the privilege of having a huge platform, of having like an incredible community and audience to speak to, and to, you know, for a podcast to market to, like, without having the other side of it, which is to have people who don't like you, who you're going to fall outside of their beliefs, ideals, and everything else. It's a human want to be liked by everyone, you know, but it's an impossibility. And I think those two things can't coincide. So like those two things can't be,
Coexistent.
Coexistent. So like, if to have all the amazing things that come with having a platform and the privilege of that, you're always going to have the other side of it, and you just have to learn to accept it.
Well, I've had a terrific time talking to you guys. Really
Thank
fun.
you, Mark.
We really, I mean, you can tell we talk for a living.
I
You're
know.
like, wow,
We'll
I
keep
thought that
going.
was 40 minutes.
No, you're good content. Like,
We'll give you whatever you
I
need.
just asked a little question and it goes on for 10 minutes. No, but you've been wonderful. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much,
Thanks,
Mark.
ladies.
Thanks for having us.